Hey everybody, this is BoursinBurger, and welcome to another episode of Teslastuff. So usually in this video series we explore Teslagrad's mechanics, because, well, we're speedrunners. That's how we find new ways to complete the game as quickly as possible. But this time, I'm not going to talk about mechanics at all. In this episode of Teslastuff, I'm going to do an in-depth analysis of the lore of Teslagrad. Teslagrad features a lot of silent storytelling. From the opening cutscene depicting the raid on your house, to the propaganda posters you see during the escape through the village, to the dead bodies littering the entrance of the Tesla Tower, it's clear from the very beginning that something terrible has happened. As you explore the tower, collect the 36 scrolls, examine the drawings and murals on the walls, and view the animatronic puppet shows in the theaters, you start to assemble an idea of the backstory. Let's put all of those elements together and see if we can create a timeline of the history of Electropia. The former occupants of this abandoned tower were a group of wizards known as Teslamancers. Some of their early artwork shows them as farmers and adventurous explorers, capturing and taming wild grus, and using them as war beasts and pack animals, and eventually discovering ancient artifacts that set the Teslamancers on the path of becoming masters of electromagnetism and robotics. The luminary of the Teslamancers who would lead them through this technological evolution was Solomon Tesla. But then came the Great War, a barbarian invasion. The town of Teslagrad would surely have been lost, but with the help of a hero's brawn and Solomon Tesla's magnificent inventiveness in the form of a lightning sword, the barbarian invasion was quelled, the barbarians were subjugated, and the hero was crowned king of Electropia. The animatronic theater shows it as a simple confrontation, but the stained glass in the tower's chapel paints a much deeper picture. Cities were destroyed. Many people were killed, loved ones were lost. The tomb in Winter Garden shows that Solomon Tesla lost his wife, who was also the king's sister, making the two men brothers-in-law. A young Oleg lost his parents and became orphaned, and was taken in by the king as his right-hand man. After the Great War was a period of great prosperity. The city of Teslagrad was expanding outward at the same rate as the Tesla Tower was expanding upward. Solomon Tesla was shown making diplomatic connections with foreign countries and acquiring their unique inventions. Faradayus came from Mesmer, and Furnace and the Voltwalkers' robotic base came from Motorland. In addition to imports, the Teslamancers were also shown crafting their own inventions. The lice from Angloria were augmented with iron plates to turn them into iron lice. Power plants and Voltwalkers were also their own creations. To make the Voltwalkers, they used Furnace for glass blowing in order to reproduce the magnetic orbs originally discovered in their archaeological digs. And then there's the little hints about a mystical fruit growing from the massive tree in Winter Garden, where consuming its juice would give youthful strength. But with a caveat: consuming too much would turn people sinister. Meanwhile, the king was eager for conquest. Maybe to prevent another invasion, but more likely in a bid for more power. Regardless, he would need the Teslamancers' help. Solomon Tesla was completely against the idea, not only because it would ruin the relationships that he had cultivated with their foreign neighbors, but also because of his first-hand experience of the horrors and loss of war, and he didn't want to experience it again. So on behalf of the Teslamancers, he refused to help. Angry at the Teslamancers' refusal, the king attempted his assault with only his foot soldiers for support. But without the Teslamancers, his invasion attempt was a disaster. His attacks were repelled, his army was routed, and he was forced to retreat. Upon returning to Teslagrad, the bitter king turned his fury towards the Teslamancers. While his countrymen were recuperating from their failed conquest, he labeled the Teslamancers as traitors and banned their technology. He had also convinced Oleg that the Teslamancers were just as responsible as the barbarians for causing the loss of his family. This schism culminated in the king ordering a genocide of the Teslamancers, with Oleg leading the onslaught. Your character's father, upon witnessing the beginnings of the genocide, sprang into action. He recorded the Teslamancers' knowledge and history upon the scrolls hidden within the tower. He smuggled you as an infant into the village and delivered you to the safe house in the opening cutscene where you and your mother went into hiding. And it can also be assumed that he was the one who built the animatronic theaters to explain what had happened. I'll expound more on that theory later. But at this point, Solomon Tesla makes some important revelations. The family tree identifies you as Solomon's grandson. So not only are you a Teslamancer, but you are the last Teslamancer in the lineage. And since Solomon and the king are brothers-in-law, this makes the king your grand-uncle-in-law. Solomon also reveals a prophecy. You are the one destined to defeat the king and restore peace to Teslagrad. So that's all of the pre-game history. Let's fast forward to the present now, shall we? A few years later. Let's recap the situation as the game begins. Your father has gone missing. Your safe house has been raided. You escape the king's soldiers, and you take refuge in the abandoned Tesla tower with Oleg in hot pursuit. By the time you reach Furnace, you wonder why he's so angry. Consider this. In the earlier years, he was clearly used for small-scale forging and glassblowing in the construction of Voltwalkers. However, elsewhere in the tower, there is an enormous multi-story forge autonomously recycling and mass-producing Voltwalkers. Furnace, by this point, was clearly rendered obsolete, and was likely neglected for many years, even before the tower became abandoned. You'd be angry too, I'd bet. Next we come to Faradeus, who is also showing years of neglect as compared to the mural showing her original glorious plumage. At this point, I'd like to take a moment to talk about the name references to famous inventors. Faradeus was named after Michael Faraday, who is famous for his discoveries in electromagnetism and electrochemistry. His namesake, the farad, is the SI unit for measuring electrical capacitance. Teslagrad and Solomon Tesla were, of course, named after Nikola Tesla, who designed the modern alternating current induction motor. His SI unit, the Tesla, measures magnetic flux density, basically the strength of a magnetic field. Finally, Guericke's orb is named after Otto von Guericke, who invented the first electrostatic generator and also conducted experiments with vacuums, where, in his most famous example, a pair of copper hemispheres were joined into a sphere and the air inside was pumped out. 2 teams of 8 horses each were unable to pull the halves of the sphere apart, demonstrating that the pressure of the atmosphere surrounding the evacuated sphere could generate significant force. Alright, that's your science history lesson for the day. Let's get back to Teslagrad. When you finally confront and defeat Oleg, the two of you fall into the Act 3 theater, where the final truth is revealed. Amid the Teslamancer massacre, Solomon Tesla tried to appeal to the king, only to be murdered by him in cold blood. Upon seeing this, Oleg realizes that he has been manipulated, and his misguided revenge against the Teslamancers was orchestrated by the king. He hangs his head in shame and walks away. This theater is the strongest indicator that it was likely your father who built the animatronics, because surely Solomon couldn't have built a theater depicting his own death. Unless that was also a prophecy. Who knows? Speaking of prophecy, the theater entitled Happy Ending is a bit of a wreck, but you can tell from the ceiling that it was supposed to display the prophecy of Tesla Kid defeating the king, which would indeed be a happy ending. Maybe one of the king's invaders destroyed this theater on purpose, perhaps? Maybe it was the king himself, considering that you encounter the corpse of Solomon Tesla just a little further inside the tower. After you defeat Garika's orb, Oleg shows up again, but this time he shows a sign of redemption by dragging you to safety and leaving your Teslastuff. As you approach the king's storm palace, you encounter a large vehicular drill being used by the soldiers. It's the same model drill that appears in the courtyard in the beginning of the game, presumably used to breach the Tesla Tower in the beginnings of the genocide. Later in the palace, you reach a bridge which the king destroys, sending you into the dungeon. Unless, of course, you're an accomplished speedrunner and you bypass the dungeon entirely, but I promised we weren't talking about game mechanics here, so we fall into the dungeon. Here you discover the fate of your father, who was captured and left here to die. As you climb out of the dungeon, Oleg lends a helping hand again, and then seemingly disappears. If we follow where he went, we discover a secret room behind a painting, with a drawing indicating that Oleg and the soldiers were conspiring to kill the king in his sleep. It seems they too were weary of his despotic rule. But the biggest indicator of how far the king had gone can be seen right outside his chamber. It seems the king had also learned of the youth-restoring discovery of the Teslamancers, but he discovered that pulverizing bodies and distilling and drinking the remains granted the same effect. I'm sure that this practice made his followers a little apprehensive, might have contributed to the regicide angle a little bit, and clearly it was working, because during the king fight, a man old enough to be your grandfather has the agility of a man a generation younger. After defeating the king, if you've collected all 36 scrolls to get the best ending, your return trip through the village shows that everybody, including the soldiers, is celebrating the king's demise. Miss Terry and Lord Clonington make their initial appearances before being featured in World to the West, and your mother is safe and sound, having triumphantly dispatched the raid. The Teslamancers survive another war, but again, at what cost? So that's my interpretation of the story of Teslagrad. I'm very curious to hear other people's thoughts on the lore, so please leave your comments below. Thank you for watching, and keep an eye on this channel for more Tesla stuff.